Hello, my fellow YouTubers and subscribers, and welcome to my latest movie ranking, where today I rank the films in the Matrix Quadrilogy. Yes, all four movies. With the release of The Matrix Resurrections, I thought it was a good idea to rank the movies. Not that it's fucking worth it. Like all my rankings, this is just a subjective list, my own personal opinion. If you disagree, that's fine, as long as you keep things civil in the comments section below. Without further ado, let's get on with it. So number 4, coming in at the bottom, the worst of the Matrix franchise for me. This is not going to be everybody's choice, but for me, The Matrix Reloaded. Oh, this movie is a mess. It's a fucking mess. It's so long, it's so boring, it's so overcomplicated. I can't understand half the things that go on in this film. I think it's a total mess, and there's some really cringe-worthy scenes as well, like the Monica Bellucci kiss scene and the Zion rave and Trinity and Neo sex scene. It's just really weird, and the plot is so damn convoluted and confusing. It's almost like they're trying to make this film, but also try and set the third one up, and that's all it is. It just feels like filler. It just feels like a setup for film 3, and it doesn't really go anywhere for me. And the action goes on too long, and I think some of the CGI is really, really bad. The freeway chase, it's overrated for me. I appreciate if some people like it, that's fine, but for me, it's just boring. As impressive as it looks, it goes on for too long, so I'm really sorry, but I just don't care for The Matrix Reloaded. I mean, the music is good. The performances are okay. I mean, Keanu Reeves, again, he's pretty stiff in this one, and I just don't understand what they were trying to do with Trinity. It's like they just can't seem to know what they want to do with her, because they keep killing her off in the franchise, and you know, the whole thing about Trinity's death is confusing. This movie just raises so many more questions than it answers, and the ending, again, I mean, but by the time we got to the end, I just completely lost interest. And when we got to the architect, the way he was explaining how the Matrix worked, it just washed right over me. I'm sorry. For me, this is just the worst film of the franchise, just because it's so damn confusing and it's so boring. It goes on for like 2 hours, 18 minutes. And quite frankly, there's not much to watch, really, other than some of the action scenes. The direction is kind of all over the place by the Wachowskis. So they're trying to cram too much into this runtime, and again, some of the CGI is not aged well, and yeah, it kind of, you know, the action has really lost all of its novelty after the first one, and for me, it's just a very, very bad sequel. You can watch my review for further discussion on that, but yeah, The Matrix Reloaded. Coming in at number 3, which is not much better, The Matrix Revolutions. Well, it's a marginal improvement for me, just because it's a little bit shorter, only by about 10 minutes. It's not as torturous to get through as the second film. It's certainly more action-packed. It's probably the most action-packed of the franchise. I mean, you know, with the war on Zion and the battle against the machines. I mean, that was kind of cool. I kind of enjoyed the spectacle. I mean, it is gratuitous. It is gratuitously dumped on screen, but at least it's something a bit more entertaining. But after a while, it just becomes boring, and the plot is, again, convoluted. It's just so hard to follow. This is why they should not have made the second and third movies simultaneously and released them in the same year. I think that was a big mistake. And the final fight with Neo and Smith, well, I suppose that was... It was kind of cool in some respects. It was very ridiculous when they were just floating in the air. I really didn't understand that. I thought that was stupid. And the ending when Neo kind of ascends into the Matrix, I guess is kind of a metaphor for his death and for him. I think there's some kind of biblical Jesus imagery in that, but it was just a really confusing ending. And again, killing off Trinity. Again, what the hell is up with this character? Why do they... What is their problem with her? Why do they keep killing her off? I've got no idea. And yeah, and also the bit of the train station at the beginning was just filler. It was just to pad out the runtime, and then I mean, the club action scene was, I suppose, was kind of cool, but ultimately, it's just the final battle, and it's a bit like the Star Wars prequels. You can throw as many special effects on the screen as you want, but if you don't have a good story, if you don't have characters to care about, then it's not going to work. And for me, this just doesn't work. It's just a very poor way to end the trilogy, and it's, again, very confusing. It's a very confusing mess of a film. Lawrence Fishburne sadly gets kind of sidelined in this film. I mean, he gets involved in some of the action. That's probably the biggest compliment I can give him. But he's not allowed much to do, sadly. And again, Neo and Smith's fight at the end is, it's meh, And I mean, Hugo Weaving has been kind of wasted in the sequels, I think. And honestly, maybe he should have just stayed dead after the first one, because really there is no place for him in the series after that. So yeah, to be honest, it's such a forgettable movie as well. I can't remember it that much, and that's sad, because I only watched it recently for the review or rant. So yeah, I mean, there is some nice stuff with the little girl at the beginning. She's quite a sweet little actress, but once again, the direction is kind of all over the place by the Wachowskis. And yeah, it was, these two sequels were made for cash grabs, and they were made simultaneously to rush them out to earn some bucks. But I think delaying the third movie would have probably helped. I think maybe if they could have greenlit the two sequels, but they could have said, right, we want Reloaded out for 2003, and we want Revolutions out for 2004. Very much like Pirates of the Caribbean, when they had Dead Man's Chest in 2006, At World's End in 2007. They could have done it. And same with Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows. Have Part 1 in 2010, Part 2 in 2011. Doesn't have to be the same year, They could have spent more time on at least the third one in order for this to work, but it just didn't. So anyway, moving on. Number 2 is The Matrix Resurrections. Oh, these sequels are not very good. None of them are very good. This is the 4th movie now, and this is where I've got to the point where I just feel, you know what, The Matrix is not a franchise. It's one film. Stick to the first one and just be done with it, because this 4th movie is just so unnecessary. I mean, it's not terrible. It's certainly a bit better than the last two. It's not as bloated and it's not as convoluted. But what it is convoluted, but it's not as, it doesn't feel like they're cramming as much in this time. Partly because it's longer. It's like 2.5 hours long, which is gratuitously over long for me. And the story, again, doesn't really make sense. And there was all these in-jokes about the, Warner Brothers wanting to make a sequel to The Matrix, and all this corporate indulgent pandering. I just can't stand it. I think it's stupid. And the absence of Lawrence Fishburne and Hugo Weaving is a real shame, It really is. I mean, despite the best efforts of the guy that plays Smith in this movie and the guy that plays Morpheus, I mean, they're perfectly okay actors, but I just don't see them as Smith and Morpheus. I just don't. I just don't think they're that good. Despite when he says, Mr. Anderson, It just all falls very flat for me. I mean, Neil Patrick Harris is perfectly decent as the villain, but yeah, again, it's just such an unremarkable movie. I mean, seeing Keanu Reeves back, I suppose, is nice, and Carrie-Anne Moss, but they're clearly here for the paycheck. They clearly don't really care about the story they're telling, and Lana Wachowski's direction is okay, but again, it feels like they're forcing themselves to go back to the Matrix. There's no real need to do this. It's just so unnecessary. I mean, I'm not saying the third movie was perfect. Far from it. It's a terrible film, but at least it was an ending. At least at the end there was some, finality to the story. For me, this is an unnecessary nostalgia trip. It's a retread of a franchise that didn't need to be retrodden. And whilst the execution of it is not bad, it's okay. I mean, visually, I can't really fault the movie. It's pretty impressive in that regard, and the action scenes are quite good. Aside that, there's not much else to watch this film for. If you're a diehard fan of the other films, then yeah, see it. See it as much as you want. I also think the cinematography for this movie is really weird. The fact that when they're in the Matrix, that we don't have these kind of green filters that we had in the first 3 films. So it doesn't make this movie feel as much of a Matrix movie as the first 3. And yeah, despite the visual stuff, we do also have Neo and Trinity's romance. That is done a little bit better. I mean, the acting is still pretty wooden, but at least I bought it this time. I think they devoted a bit more time to it, so I invested slightly more. But that's not a compliment. I honestly think that The Matrix Resurrections, it's it's mediocre, to be perfectly honest. But it's the second best of the series! So take that with good grace. And of course, number 1 is the first film, The Matrix. This movie is awesome. It's a classic. It's a revolutionary film for its time. Yes, the effects are dated now. It is over 20 years old now, so yeah, clearly, natural wear and tear was going to kick in at some point. But looking at it for the time, and rewatching it recently on Blu-ray, it is still impressive. You'd be pretty cynical to deny that The Matrix is impressive. There's a lot about this film that works. For me, the story is amazing. It's a little complex in places, but the story is amazing. I like the fact that it's a movie about choice, taking the red pill or the blue pill, and Neo being the one. And it's a very sort of clever film in terms of the whole story of the chosen one and how that fits in, and also the technical aspects of it. It's really good. It's a really confident piece of filmmaking, and the action sequences are superb, and the story is wonderful. And I think the ending is fine. It doesn't require a sequel, so I think The Matrix is a standalone film, and I think it works because of that. And I think the acting in this one is probably the best of the series. I mean, Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss, they're a little bit deadpan, but the same with Lawrence Fishburne. But for me, it looks like they're kind of enjoying themselves in this film, whereas in the sequels, it looks as though they're just kind of tired probably because of the filming schedule, because they were filming both of them back to back. Whereas this one, it feels so fresh, it feels so new. The pace of it is amazing, the direction is amazing by the Wachowskis, and they created movie magic. And clearly it was because the studio wanted 2 sequels out in the same year. So, yeah. And The Matrix has gone on to spawn a lot of imitators after it because of the bullet time sequence and the action and the way it was filmed. And we just never seen things like this done before. So I like the fact that this film is so innovative with what it was trying to do. And I think it succeeded. And I don't think the way the sequels turned out tarnishes its memory. I think, honestly, look at The Matrix as a standalone piece of film and you can still go, wow, that was great. That was really good. And you don't need the sequels to back it up. If anything, the sequels, were never going to live up to this. It was always going to be this film that struck gold. And all the training scenes are great, and it's just so entertaining. And again, the concept of it is very clever. This is probably the best film that the Wachowskis have ever made, and that says a lot. It really does. So yeah, that's my ranking of the Matrix Quadrilogy. What do you think of these movies? Please comment down below, let me know. What's your ranking of the series? And please hit the subscribe button for more content to come in the future. And stay tuned for my Home Alone movies ranking. So until next time, I'm Mr. Tarnus11. Thank you for watching. See ya. Bye for now.